why am I doing this? You have to remember you're looking at somebody's highlight reel. Everybody has imposter syndrome.
What is your process when you're wanting to tell a story? How much business do you kind of really get from a large social media following? Would you now consider yourself a success?
It's complicated.
Alex Strohl, it's an absolute pleasure and honor to meet you online, at least. I wish I was in, where are you now, France?
Yes. Yep. Southeast of France, Ardèche, in my little hut cottage office that I am slowly improving. I'm actually building a second one. Just needed a place to do my work away from the main house. It's been great.
Cool. What is your work? Give us a kind of introduction to the audience as to, I guess, who you are, but more importantly, kind of what you do and why you do it.
Yeah, I'm a photographer. I think I can be defined as one photographer. I make films, and I do a lot of creative direction as well. So I'm just a very visual person who happens to use their skills for the benefit of large companies. That's the high level elevator pitch. And then obviously people will ask, oh, what kind of photography do you make? And then it makes sense, right? If you meet a surgeon, you ask them what kind of surgery they do. So I respect the question. I'd obviously do 95% of my work outside in the outdoors. And I do tend to gravitate towards people who worked outside and who are I love showing people who are busy, while I photograph them. Athletes, farmers, craftsmen, makers, all that stuff really gets me excited. So, yeah, here's my long-winded answer.
It's not long-winded at all. I think, if people were to see your, I guess, online profiles and your website and Instagram and all the rest of it, it's fairly, I guess, identifiable as to what you do. But I'm more interested in like the why and how you started with photography itself. I presume the filmmaking came after photography, but
it did.
Give us an insight as to kind of that background.
Yeah, so you're curious about the genesis of photography or filmmaking?
Yeah, photography. Let's start with photography, and we'll probably move into filmmaking after.
Photography really happened. I mean, I've told these stories a lot. Photography started really by accident, where I was just looking for a way to fill my time as a teenager. Going to boarding school in the weeks and coming back in the weekends to this property in the woods that my parents decided to base at. And, it was kind of aimless when you were 14. I just had a motorcycle, a dirt bike, and I'd go on rides through the forest. But it all felt kind of aimless. I've always been one looking to look for the reasons to do something. Why am I doing this? So I started taking photos in a quest of like, why am I riding my motorcycle through these woods? And then I happen to be naturally decent at it. Like I've always been a very observant person. And that, one thing led to another, really. I got really lucky with the beginning of social media. And I've always I always had a deep desire to connect with people. So photography was a way to meet people and look at other people's work, share photos. So I think that's what really matters to me, is whether I can use it to meet people. Maybe I could have been a writer if I was any good at it, for example. But it just happens that I'm really visual and that, you just do it. Everybody does that. You just follow the path of least resistance. Like, well, I'm naturally good at this. So why don't I just do that? That's really how life goes.
What I think I've never heard anyone actually say that, but it makes complete sense. Just follow the path of least resistance, because we all want an easy life. And, if we find something that we're good at and usually if you're good at it, it kind of comes easy to you. But
it's not like...
Then what about filmmaking?
Yeah.
That's an easier transition to...
It's not laziness though, Matt. It's more like you have to raise your strengths, right? And and life is a limited amount of time. It doesn't mean you shouldn't learn new things, but you can train those new things sort of outside of the main work hours, right? But to me, it was like pretty simple. And I was like, man, I love freedom, and photography really gives me a lot of freedom to do the life I really want to. So I built everything from the ground up, really. It's just one of those origin stories where you're like broke and don't know what to do, and you kind of start putting pieces together, and you're like, this is working, this is not working. It's a very, it's a nice activity. It's a nice job because you get to control a lot of the outcome from beginning to end. The same way that somebody builds a piece of furniture from beginning to end, you do build a shoot from beginning to end. That's one of the aspects of photography, and a good transition into video, because video, you have to learn to do the opposite and just let go and to not control the total outcome, because there's, it takes a village to make a film.
Yeah, for sure. And you talked about freedom there. I think that kind of goes in with that kind of path of least resistance, and absolutely not intimating that laziness has anything to do with it. But yeah, I mean, that's who we are as humans. What does freedom look like to you? Is it so much as you are your own boss, but you still have to work with clients, have a team. So what does freedom look like to you? What does your normal day of kind of Alex is his own boss look like?
Man, there is no normal day, I will say that. Although I love the fall season because it does bring us some of those normal days where I can sort of plan it out and it happens the way I planned it from beginning to end, but those are rare. And the truth is, even as a business owner, you still have somebody as a boss. It could be your customer, your clients. So sadly, unless you're completely retired, you still have a boss. And I like having multiple bosses though, because if you don't like one, you don't have to work with that one. But when you work at a company, you only have one boss, and if you don't like them, well, it's going to be a bit of a difficult year. But if you can, fire the clients they don't like, you quote unquote fire, and they can fire you as well. No, it's fair. It's fair game. It's just business. So I do like to have multiple bosses, especially because I have approached every work relationship and every relationship in general as like, what can you teach me? What can I learn from these people? Because anybody you meet on the street is going to have something to teach you, right? One thing they do really well, you don't. Maybe they make really good bread, or maybe they cook a really good risotto, whatever. I'm just really curious. So I do like to learn from clients, and the more clients you have, the more you learn from them, right? And it's just pretty simple. So it's a constant quest for improvement. But yeah, freedom looks like to me, what freedom is to me is really doing what I want whenever I want. Sort of answer your question. It's what I've always wanted to do since I've been a little kid. It's like, can have freedom of movement and of action. And I was lucky enough that my parents gave me that freedom, and they really put a lot of trust in me, and I could be out and about. I was growing up in Madrid, and I don't know, I was probably 13. And I was really into skateboarding because I spent the summer in LA at my aunt's house. And I would take the bus to Madrid for 45 minutes from the countryside to the city to go skateboarding with friends. And I might come back that night. I might not, right? I might just call my mom, say, hey, I'm staying for the night. Cool. That's it, right? There was a lot of trust. There was not a lot of rigidity. And I think that really, sadly, set me up for a world, for a life of freedom seeking constantly, because I really had bad habits in a way.
What bad habits did you have? Or, how did that photography pursuit kind of cure those bad habits, if any?
Well, not bad habits in the sense that I was doing bad things. Although I did have a stint of graffiti, which wasn't my brightest time. But and I do love graffiti. It was just the way that I was doing it. It wasn't adding a lot of value to the world. But no bad habits in terms that I was used to being sort of on my own things, right? Like with not much control from a young age. Probably because my parents saw that they could trust me and I wasn't going to do anything really stupid. So that was the bad habits. It's like then when you start going to school and start going to high school, you're like, that frustration that builds from being tied to a chair all day listening is really what fuels It has fueled my career to this day. It's like, you know, when I see my cousins, like, oh yeah, they're younger cousins, they're going back to school or whatever. And I'm like, oh, it's true. It was September and this is when people go back to school here. And I was like, so still relieved. I'm like, God, I'm happy I'm not going back to school. You know, that kind of feeling. And that right there, that feeling of like, man, I'm glad I'm not doing that is what really fuels me every day.
And fast forward to now, as you sat across me, or the other side of the world,
Yeah.
but online, you know, do you look back at those, I guess your past, but certainly those formative years in the photography space, or at least with that dream in mind of doing what you want to do? Would you now consider yourself a success compared to that younger 13, 14-year-old?
Yes, I'll tell that younger 13, 14, like, keep going, you got this. Yeah. I wouldn't do anything differently, really. Because that's the way things go. I don't really look back on the past and kick myself for doing something or not doing it. But
that's cool. What about, you know, I try and at least impart some kind of advice, or ask our guests to impart some kind of advice to beginners. So, you know, look at Alex Strohl. You know, you look and, you know, for people who don't know, if just to look at what you've done, who you've worked with, how you've grown to such a, I guess, high level within the photography arena. You know, how do beginners get to that stage these days? You know, I know there's no one quick, easy answer, but just maybe a couple of pieces of advice from someone like yourself, having learned what you've learned. Would you be able to kind of unpack that journey for us?
Yeah. Well, first off, Matt, when I hear you say, you know, the high level of photography arena, there's one part of me that's always like, but is it really? Right? I like that's I think there's the healthy side of that's needed, right? It's like, well, you know, everybody has imposter syndrome. So this is not like false modesty. It's like really genuinely, I'm like, don't know if I'm really that good. Like I can do it, I can make it happen, but I don't know that it's, you know, I should be here talking with you. But then the other part is like, well, I guess, yeah, people want to hear it. So that's probably what I'll tell. That's what I tell beginners is that it doesn't matter who you look up to in photography or whatever, in whatever space you look at, just know that they are also unsure of themselves and they're not sure if what they're doing is right or wrong because they're figuring it out as they go. So just keep that in mind. It's almost when you go cycling with people who are way better cyclists than you, way stronger. Well, it kind of helps me to know that, hey, they're all suffering as well. You know, on this really long uphill, we're all like huffing and puffing and we're all suffering. And that to me brings me relief. So I hope that brings them relief as well. It's like, well, just know that these guys are, whoever you're looking up to, they're figuring it out. They're also struggling. They don't know if what they're doing is right or wrong. They're just in a living, right? They're focusing on efforts, not on the results. So that is probably the biggest thing that I've learned. There's also this interesting, I saw this video somewhere that was an interview of somebody who built a very large business. I don't know who it was, but this person was in their 60s. Maybe you've seen it. But it's like when you're 20, the answer was like, well, when you're 20, you think that, you know, you're so worried about what people think of you, right? And then when you're 40, you don't really care anymore. And when you're 60, you realize that no one was looking. That to me is the best. The best thing to remember is like, you know what? You do think people are looking at what you're doing, but they really aren't. And there's not even worth not caring about it because it doesn't even exist. That's all in your head, right? These are all external conditions, not internal. So that's what I would leave our beginners with.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I talk about this all the time, just with friends. You know, not even about photography, but you know, being a 40-year-old myself. Actually, when I got to 30, I really stopped caring what people think. But, I was a bit of an asshole back then, so I wouldn't want to kind of copy that.
We're all recovering assholes.
You know, I think, yeah, I think that, you know, you've touched upon. There's a lot of things that I'm going to kind of get into in a minute, but you know, we've talked about social media already. I mean, that is almost the problem with today's digital world, right? Photography or not, you know, you look at the pictures on Instagram, whether it's a photographer or an influencer or just a normal person posting some cool shit of them on holiday, right?
Yeah.
They're only posting the best stuff. So, you look at that and it's not real. But it's easy for the human brain, because we're not wired to think any other way. Look at it and go, I want to be like that, right? Or that guy is doing well, that girl is doing well, or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And it's no one cares. No one cares. Like, you're the only one that cares about that. And so it's easy to look at an Alex Strohl, or doing photography now, someone like yourself or other people with millions of followers, or working with big brands and going on cool trips and doing cool YouTube videos. It's very easy for people to go, oh, I'm either never going to get there, or I want to be like that. How do I do it? Or it can be an inspiration, or it can also be a kind of crutch.
Totally.
Right? So I think that's a really good lesson for beginners to know straight away, especially in today's social media dominated world.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You have to remember you're looking at somebody's highlight reel, right? And that's why you brought up YouTube, and I enjoy the rare videos I make on YouTube. I enjoy showing the real deal kind of thing, like putting the veneer, taking the veneer away and showing it like it really is. So that's why the videos get longer and longer every time. Just so, I don't know, it makes people feel a little better.
I agree. I mean, that you got to remember, these, like you said, everyone's human, and whether you're seeing someone's highlight reel or not, there's the human behind that who's been through struggles, who's got the same fears, who's got the same worries, who's got the same problems in their life as everyone else. That no one's different. But I think that's a great thing about photography, and I'm hoping people do it more and more. I like to show behind the scenes, just because anyone can do this. It's not like anyone's special. It's everyone has a different kind of view on what they're doing, and some may work harder than others, and some may get a bit of luck compared to others, or whatever. But in showing that behind the scenes, showing that raw process, right, is important, because otherwise there's no connection, I don't think, between the person you're looking up to and yourself. So, oh, actually, I can do this as well. Or at the end of the day, it could just be entertainment and information that we can pass along, right?
I will say that sometimes people get confused, though. They will look at, I don't know, Sebastião Salgado. Salgado drop a new book or whatever, and they'll be thinking, man, I'm going to make a sim book just like Salgado, and I sort of apply the same principles that somebody like somebody as known as Salgado will do, and then it's not going to work for them, right? So you got to be careful to what principles you apply, right, before you go and start making a print sale, and then nobody buys your prints. So there is some of that, but I'll say that the biggest problem really is the lack of vision in photography, right? Like, what's really important, once you've sort of mastered the little scales part, it's like having a vision. I think that's what really is the defining factor, and will make it or not make it. Taste and vision.
Yeah, for sure. I always split the photography kind of, or the photographer, into two types of skill sets. And if you have both, you end up being a pretty good photographer. One is just technical know-how that a monkey can learn, and the other one is that artistic vision and creation, and that artistic, I guess, touch, message, story, all of the kind of intangible parts. Why do you think there is a lack of vision these days in the photography
industry? I'm sure that it's not these days. It's just that there's more of us now, and then you see everybody's work. So there's just more work, and you see more of it. So that's why it feels like there is more. But I'm sure if you're starting photography in the 1950s and had no vision, it would have been just as problematic as it is now, right? People in the 1950s probably picked up a camera for motives that were different, because there was no outlet for it, right? It was more like a hobbyist thing that you do on your own. And the cost was so expensive that you better had a plan, right? Because it's so expensive to shoot photos and get them developed. So now all the barriers of entry are removed, which is great. People are on a levelly, playing field with laptops and a camera. So then obviously what shines now is that, well, access is there, but then there's nothing to show, right? These photos are hollow, and there's just, no real message.
So how do you counter that? What is your process when you're wanting to tell a story, create
you have to get your inspiration. You need to get inspiration. That, a photographer who doesn't look at other people's work, that's probably a lie. They tell you that. It's just an inspiration. So if you take your stuff from the same cesspool that everybody does, then it's just garbage in, garbage out, not adding any value. But if you're taking your inspiration from places that nobody does, and if they're quality on top of that, 2 criteria, take it from somewhere that people don't look at, and then 2, make sure that's a good source, right? It's also bad sources that people don't look at, right? 2 things that you have to consider. And kind of rinse and repeat. So that could mean finding some obscure blog that nobody knows, some blog spot that hasn't been updated for years, but it has really cool inspiration. And then learning about the masters of photography through their books, the Avedons and there's so many. And also going to museums and seeking inspiration in movies and all these places that your typical photographer isn't really looking at. And I always say typical photographer. There's no typical photographer, but I would say that the low hanging fruit is looking at photos on Instagram and taking your inspiration from there. So if you do that, then it's going to be tough to show a vision. So better start taking your inspo from somewhere else, as far as you can from the source of social media.
Totally agree. And wise words. I hope everyone can listen to that. It's just so easy for people these days to live their life through social media. And what is your kind of feeling with social media in general? I know you have a big following, and you consistently post on there. So I know you still use it. How do you feel about it now, back then, and how it's going to affect photography in the future?
Yeah, so social media, I'm really thankful for it. It's really built my career. It's really propelled everything I could have dreamt for and made a lot of things happen. So it's kind of hard to badmouth it. It seems like our habits are not very healthy, pretty shit. So I think that we'll look in 20 years and look at what we're doing now. And for me, the analogy is the same way that we look at food in the 90s with the advent of microwavable food and fast food and the way we're doing it uncontrolled. So I think we'll look at it the same way, like, man, 2020 something, what were we doing? Oh my God. That's probably going to be like a dark age when we look back. So for me, the future is bright. People are realizing it, social media is good, but it definitely is really up to the user, right? And what's evil is the way that it's built. It's the way to make you addicted. All things that we know, right? It's just built to be addictive, and I think it's, for adults it's fine, but for kids and teenagers seems to be pretty tragic. I don't know. I don't have our daughter's too young still to even have a phone. So I'm happy that she's born now, because I feel like by the time she'll have a phone in 10 years or whatever, things will have gotten much better for her. So right now I definitely I'm thinking about kids using social media right now, and it's just saddens me, because we didn't have that. And I'm really happy we didn't have it, honestly. It's good to be in touch with your buddies on the phone, but it's so much better to just go ride your bike and go see them and go play soccer, right? So it's complicated.
It is complicated. I don't think there's necessarily, it's not a sort of binary kind of discussion, is it? And it's nice to be. I am grateful for being in that same generation where we can remember what life was like without social media and without smartphones, right?
Yeah.
And it was. Although I love using my phone. Obviously, it's a necessary part of pretty much everyone's daily life now. Well, necessary is probably a strong word, but it's an essential part to do business and to kind of get closer to people. But so part of me wishes we were back where we were. And like you said, you were talking earlier, when you go for a bike ride and you get to your friend's house, call your mum saying, "Mum, I'm going to stay here tonight," or "I'm not coming back." It's like people didn't worry as much, right? There wasn't so much kind of paranoia. There wasn't so much anxiety. It was just
there's no way to keep tabs on me.
Yeah. what advice with that when you're speaking to beginners, what do you tell them in terms of social media? It's people obviously get very focused on, I need to grow, and a kind of follow-up question from that is, how much business do you kind of really get from a large social media following?
You do. You do.
Okay.
I'd say about 50%. You do. It's about 50% of it is inbound through people who see your work, or so it's a big part. Yeah, definitely. I think it's possible to do it without it. You just have to hustle and work as harder than anybody else. Whenever I host workshop in person, there's usually up to 10 people. And sort of the sergeant major speak at the beginning is like, only one in your group has what it takes, really. 1 out of 10 has what it takes to really become a full-time professional photographer. Some people here, some of you guys have really good jobs as engineers at tech companies and all those things. And if you like your job, you should probably keep it. But if you really have the burning passion, you should go for it. But just know that it's not for everybody. Being a freelancer, it's tough, right? So I think it's really about outworking everybody else. If you can't outsmart them, at least you can outwork them. That's what I did, at least. But not because I felt like I had to. It's like there's nothing else I would rather do than move the needle. That is so still to this day really gets me excited, is to get to work and build things, right? So if you're that kind of person who, I don't have time to watch Netflix or anything like that. So I really, it's hard for me to sit and watch something because I'm like, man, I could be creating something. So yeah, if you can, if you're that kind of person who always wants to build things, then who can never really get enough of just work because you're ambitious, right? Like, it just, to me, it's just the way my brain's wired. I'm just ambitious. So I don't know. I don't have another mode. I don't really do holidays. It's just, I'm always thinking. So if you're that person, then it's good for you. You should go and pursue a freelance career and whatever you'd like. You'll be good at it. But if that's not you, if you just enjoy doing, more relaxed paced, then probably keep your job. That's really what I share with these guys. It's really honest. I want them to be real with them. I don't want them to waste time.
Yeah, I think that's pretty valuable. Where does your ambition come from? If ambition is classified as, guess, a good word, then why do you think you're so ambitious? Where does that stem from?
I think I started reading about all these business and self-help books when I was really, really young.
Okay.
And all those books cultivate sort of a desire for improvement. So from a young age, I've always been interested in improving at something, whether it was BMX or skateboarding or whatever I was doing at the time. Whatever was the flavor of the year, I was really into improving it. So I don't think there was a reason. The point was just to improve it.
Yeah,
that to me it's good, because then you can show you tricks off it and things like that. Like, you can. So ambition, probably, I think at the root of it, as usual, it's because it enables me to have freedom, right? Ambitious equals freedom for me. Ambition, because it's a freedom to pursue the things I want to pursue, thanks to ambition. So ambition is a fuel, and that is fueled. Well, that fuels this life that I want to have. So I think it's all connected, right?
Yeah, but it's also, it sounds like with you, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, you're always, even when you achieve one thing and get what you want, you're still ambitious to do the next thing and improve and more and more. Is that a fair assumption? It's, when is enough, or is it just literally the process that you enjoy so much?
I love the process. I'm really process oriented, and if I didn't have these goals and these things I want to do, then I don't think I would get out of bed. Maybe it's just a trick for me to go do things, right? It's like, well, all right, we've done this. Let's move on to the next level. What's the next thing we're going to do? I mean, it's a family thing. None of the people in my family can really sit still. Even my dad, who's 85 now, still wakes up every day and goes to work on the land and cuts trees. And although he works for 4 to 5 hours a day, but it's physical work. You're carrying chainsaws, moving logs, and cutting branches, and he does that every single day of the year. There is no Christmas Day. It's like, what do you mean it's Christmas Day? Yeah, I'm still going out and working. So I think that's just the way we are. We just love doing those things that we're passionate or interested in, and it just feels like it's the only thing we're here to do, right? It's our mission. Same with my brother. We're always doing stuff.
Yeah. If people don't have that innate drive, I mean, for me, and you touched upon it earlier, it's building things. I love the process of like creating something. When I get a finished, let's talk about photography. If I get a finished photo, I go, okay, that's good. Yeah. Next, what's the next kind of thing, right? That end result is not as satisfying for me as the process and that kind of expectation dopamine hit of, the end result, the product. What do I get out of this? And then it's the next. If people don't have that, or may not be able to identify that trait in themselves, do you think, career in photography is I guess, possible? I know you're talking about the people in your workshops. It's difficult to, I guess you have to be really honest with yourself, right? Am I really cut out for this? Do I really anticipate it to be 16-hour days, 7 days a week, just to land a job, right? I think kind of getting newbies into that frame of mind is quite difficult. But tell us about your experiences with, I guess, identifying that in people and motivating them, right?
It's interesting. It makes me think of last winter. I mean, I'm in my mid-30s, and I decided to get better at freestyle skiing, jumps and tricks. So I started working with this coach in Montana, and whenever I would try to do, really great guy, Danner, and whenever I wouldn't land my trick, or I wouldn't do the move correctly, I'd go back like, Danner, what happened? And I did everything that we said I was going to do. And his answer is usually very stoic, and he would just look at me and say, Alex, you just didn't want it bad enough. And I think that to me, it sounds simple, obviously, like, yeah, easy answer. But when you think about it, it rings a lot of truth in general in life, right? Like, maybe you didn't want that bad enough, right? Maybe you didn't just, and it's true, whenever I wouldn't land those tricks, maybe it's because I was maybe afraid of the outcome of falling, going too far, too fast, overdoing something. So then you have these things in your head, and then you don't want it bad enough because you're concerned about the results. So I'd say that's the biggest thing is, do you really want to do this thing? And if you do, then you're going to find every possible way. And I think the ones who don't is because they don't want it bad enough, right? It's as simple as that. There's no other outcome for me. There's no other thing I'm going to pursue, right? If I'm not making photos or just building creative direction, mood board stacks, then what am I going to do, right? It's the only thing I can do. So it's not like this is another plan. There's no plan B.
Yeah. Which is both exciting and scary, I guess, at the same time. But you must get to a level where you go, okay, I'm good enough, or at least I've proven to myself enough that I can do this, and therefore I don't need to panic so much that there isn't a plan B or where the next job is going to come from. Right? Trust it, have faith in your own proven track record, I guess. Yeah. Where does your new inspiration come from? I mean, you've been doing it for so many years. You've done a lot of projects, a lot of jobs, a lot of personal stuff, personal projects. Do you ever get that kind of writer's block, essentially? Like, where am I going to go next? What am I going to do next?
Yeah, I think we all do. That's normal. I find that happens once a year. But I find that the most refreshing projects I go on are like tourism projects. I think tourism offices have gotten really good at building these trips for people like me, for photographers, in a sense that is really, they take a lot of cues from, if you take the example of the video, I just put a new video on YouTube that's about Allure, the northern region of France.
Sure, yeah.
That few people go to. Yeah, and when these guys reached out a year ago about this concept of of like, we want you to come here, you in the worst possible season, in the storm season, in the end of November. Okay, cool. Already there's something interesting there, right? And then after that, I've done enough tourism projects to know that it's a bit shallow sometimes. Most of the time, you're just going to go see nice places and leave. You've never really been there. So it's like this time I really want to connect with a lot of different people, because I think that what makes a destination, although this sounds cheesy, but it's true, what makes a destination is the people there.
Yeah.
So who do I meet? So I really press them for connections to farmers and just people off the land, who lived off the land, who'd have a story to tell, a different point of view, athletes who live there, who've decided to live there, although it's hard for their sport, right? If you're a mountain bike athlete, Limoges doesn't have a lot of mountains, right? You need downhills if you're an NTB athlete. So I was really interested in what made all these people kind of stick around, because the weather is so terrible. I was like, why are you there? So I find that these kind of projects where that's what's most inspiring to me. That's where the inspiration comes from, is in sort of unearthing this perspective shift, right? Like, what's an unexpected thing I can bring to this project? Well, let's meet the people who decide to be there against all odds and when the weather is not cooperating. That is my form of inspiration, is bringing this simple idea, like, what if, or wouldn't it be cool if, insert question there.
Yeah, I love it. I have something in common with that, I guess. I mean, I always, as a portrait photographer, I try and uncover the lesser known people that, I don't know anything about, or I think other people don't know anything about. And that whole process and getting to know them in the process is the most enjoyable part. And I totally agree with you. And people really do make the place, they make the culture, they shape the environment, they shape the narrative of that place, and fit in with whatever environmental conditions they have. So I think that's really important for people to understand who are into travel. It's not about going to a place and getting a few shots for your Instagram. It's about really meeting the people, learning about who they are and why they're there, and what generational history they have, what cultural practices they have, and what language they speak. Just all of that, right? It's just fascinating.
Yeah, if you can make the time. I mean, it takes time, right, to do that. It's not your typical trip, but I will say that what really moves me is photographing places where, not the places where people influence the landscape, but the other way around. I want to go to places where the landscape influences people. And usually that's found when the landscape and the conditions, the weather, are pretty bad.
Yeah.
That's what really interests me. So that's my form of inspiration, is thinking about it that way.
Give us an insight into projects like tourism company projects who hire you to go and do whatever, right? Give us an insight to what that's like and what kind of things they ask you to do, what your process is when you're doing those types of jobs.
Yeah, well, let's keep digging on the example of Limoges wanting to promote off-season travel, because a lot of destinations have this situation, this problem where they're really busy in the high season. Maybe that's winter, maybe that's summer, depending on where they are. But then the shoulder season is just dead. So they're all trying to promote shoulder season travel, but there's a reason shoulder season travel is shoulder season travel. It's usually because the weather isn't favorable. It's just harder. So they were like, we got to promote off-season travel, and what's really cool is the storms. Big Atlantic storms kind of wipe the landscape. It's like, cool, all right. So that's the concept. Then let's build an idea. So they knew they wanted to make a film about sort of my journey there. Cool. So that's actually how the whole project started, is because the film crew who was proposing that project, they knew my work and they brought it to the client. Sometimes that's the way it works, networking. So this guy called Captain Evil, that's their studio, brought me the idea, like, hey, you want to do this film for Limoges? They want to do it about bad weather travel off season. Do you want to be in it? I was like, yeah, sure. So once we get through that, then we have to come up with the concept, and we're going to come up with the itinerary. So the client will have some highlights, some things they want to show, right? Like the sort of the base. If there's base and travel and mid-range, their base is their highlight locations. Like, they're so beautiful, like whatever. It would be like the big cliffs they have there, and the Mont Saint Michel, like this very famous place. So once we go through Yeah. So once we do these two things, then what's next? This is where I come into place, right? Like, all right, we have a few pieces there. We have sprinkles, one every 2 days of your highlights. And what do we do with the remaining 8 days? So this is where we start talking like, well, here's the people I want to meet. And then they will submit a list of all the people. Sometimes the farmers don't have websites, right? But they have a few photos. This is a person who does this, organic farmer. This is this guy's interesting. Luke has a coffee shop out of a 2CV, and he posts up at the Mont Saint Michel viewpoint and makes coffee for people. So all these things, I just request for as broad as I can of a list of people to meet. And then from there, we narrow it down to the good ones. We might even have talks with those people, like interviews in advance, like a phone call, like this, tell me about what you do. And then if it sounds good, then we'll agree to the meeting kind of thing. And then once you have your talent locations in place, your subjects and your talent locations in place, then the client does an itinerary and they book your hotels and book your flights, and then you show up.
And then, so carry on about kind of when you're on location, how does that work? What is your personal kind of process with that?
Well, usually you're jet lagged. So you're ready to hit the ground running. You show up jet lagged, like, all right, let's go. So you just have to know yourself, right? I think it's important to sort of know your body. If you know that jet lag is tough on you, then tell the client you'll need to fly in 2 days before. Right. You control those things. I'm really happy to start working right away. I feel pretty energized anyways. So we just carry up and we start going. And this is when reality hits, is because you've planned all these things. We were going to do, for example, for La Moche, we were going to do this little fixed wing flight over the Mont Saint Michel at sunset.
Cool.
That was going to, to shoot very unique views that are hard to get because you can't fly drones there, thankfully. But guess what? It was storm season, so that day it was raining and too windy to take off. All right, so what do we do then? You start moving pieces around, right? Because like Mike Tyson said so wisely, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. So You got to get punched in the face for sure. So then you need to have backups. You need to, it really depends what kind of trip you want to have. For me, I really want to have a trip that I enjoy. Not every photographer wants to enjoy their trip. Some of them just want to get it done and leave. And that's good too. I'd rather spend a little more time on the ground, but really have a good time with the people I'm there, have good food, good coffees. So from the get-go, we just got to let the client know that we can't get as much done in a day because we actually want to enjoy ourselves. So I think that comes with experience and time and being able to tell that to the client with a straight face. Like, we're going to need another day and a half because we actually would like to think about what we're doing and not just rush through it. We need a weather day. So then you show up to the locations. Let's say you're meeting the farmer, show up in the morning. And what's important is to create rapport, right? Because all these people, you might have talked to them, you might have not. They might not even know who the fuck you are. Like, who's this guy showing up on my farm, right? With this film crew. So then you have 30 seconds to create rapport and set up the mood for the day. And that's obviously that's where it's important to be interested in people, because the truth, if you're genuine, it kind of has a good ring to it. If you're genuine, people can tell. So I usually explain what I'm here for and what I'm interested in, what parts of I'm interested in the farm, and then ask them to give me a walkthrough of what they do in a day. Like, well, maybe I do the carrots now because carrots are in season, and then I have this cool, interesting tractor that I've built that's electric, and then we're, cool. So some things we're kind of playing jazz at that point with the film crew. We're like, all right, cool. Well, he's got this tractor. It's raining now. Maybe do the tractor first in the shed, and then we go out into the fields to do the carrots when hopefully the rain stops. Then you're just playing jazz at that point. You're doing documentary work, so there's no tight production like that. It's really fun.
Really fun. There's kind of like a loose structure, loose plan, and then there's enough room for improvisation and plan Bs and plan Cs. Sounds ideal.
Yeah, with tourism work, I enjoy that. Yeah, very different from commercial shoots where everything is bang, 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 and everything is kind of spoken for. But yeah, for tourism, that's the ones that I found the most refreshing.
Yep. What's your favorite output of your work? Is it Do you? I know you've dabbled in books and obviously have a big online presence. What else? Do you get into things like NFTs, prints?
Mm. Yeah, it sounds old fashioned, but my favorite output is books.
Yeah.
I don't do enough of them, but that's really what I enjoy. Just because I enjoy looking at books myself. I do like going to see shows in galleries, but it's not something you can do every day, but you can look at a book every day.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's my favorite output. Yeah, there's been some NFT action back in 2020, 2021 maybe. It's been a while. Yeah. I think one of your questions was about NFTs, and I don't really know. I don't really keep tabs on that kind of technological advancements. I just know
Okay.
that what I need to know about AI right now.
Yeah.
But for NFTs, I'm not sure what the future is. I have really, really no business talking about it. I just enjoy the idea that people can own work, and I like the commission structure of it. Like because when somebody bought a painting, that was the end of the commission. So I like the idea of NFTs where the royalties get shared with the new owners, but still the artist receives a commission. I think that's a great way of thinking.
Yeah. You mentioned AI. I don't want to I don't want to kind of sit too long with it, but I guess it's always a hot topic with photographers these days. Do you give it much attention? I know you said you kind of have to at least recognize the impact of it. How do you feel about it? What do you think is going to happen with photography moving forward?
Yeah, honestly, I give it attention as an investor because
Okay.
anything that's hot is, yeah, anything that's hot. I mean, when Microsoft starts investing in AI, and then OpenAI is the leader, and then all the other companies are looking for a solution because OpenAI is getting too expensive, kind of thing. That's where I'm like, oh, interesting. All right, there's a gap to be filled. Somebody's going to fill it, and whoever gets on board with that is going to win. So I get it. I get on board with it more as an investor than not as a photographer. I learned to do also this AI moves on Photoshop before there was even Lightroom, like the retouching and moving things. So I do still find that I can do a better job at it than AI can. When it comes down to removing stuff or making background. But if you have no idea how to do it, then yeah, of course, AI is great. It makes it easy for everybody in that sense of sort of the editing sense. I do like to hit the Lightroom buttons to see what the auto does, and the AI generated nose removal, nose reduction is useful. Although it's not as good as Topaz. So yeah, I think it's very useful in general for the industry. I don't worry about AI taking my job or things like that. That's like the hot question, What are you going to do when people don't buy photos and just use AI? But the thing is with AI is that you still need an art director running the AI, prompting, right? I mean, now there's professional prompters, but you still need somebody running that prompt because AI has no taste. Doesn't know taste.
Yeah. It's an impossible question to answer for a start because no one knows what's going to happen. But yeah, I hope photography isn't distilled down into just prompting, but it may be in some of the subsections of photography, but I don't see it being a catastrophic.
I still think you'll have people who want to see a book and hold a book in their hands, and you have other people who just want to use a nice camera in their hands and shoot it because it makes them feel like a photographer and makes them feel good. So I don't see that going away.
I mean, film photography is still around. That's analogous to, I guess, the threat that AI poses. But moving on, I'm going to finish this conversation with kind of a tradition on this show. It's our previous guests usually write a question for the next guest, not knowing who they are. So I wanted to ask you that at the end, and then kind of off air, I'll get you to at least either email me or you can tell me a question for the next guest. But the question for you is, why do you think people follow you and your work?
And so the why questions, these are always hot. Why? I think I'd like to think, and I don't know, I can't put words in people's mouths, but I do think it's because I don't take myself too seriously. I'm pretty transparent. Um, and I like to make things approachable. I've always been about removing barriers, So whatever I do, I try to make it seem approachable for people, because the last thing I want to do is people have FOMO when I look at my thing. And I'd rather have them be motivated when I look at my work. Like, yeah, cool. That's how you do it, or that's what it is, or that's something I could do. So that's really my message.
Cool. And that comes across. I mean, I haven't followed you for too long, maybe 6 months, I think. But I love your content mainly because of that lightheartedness, and you can tell you have a sense of humor. You don't take it too seriously. You really enjoy what you do, and I think that's really important for anyone who's starting out. Is just try your best. Not It's really difficult, especially when you're starting. Try your best not to chase the dollar. Try and do it for the right reasons, but if you can just enjoy the process and have passion for that process, then the rest will come. But that certainly comes through in what you put out there. So thank you for that. It's definitely inspiration.
I just want to add that, listen, you can fake it for a year or two, but at some point the real you is going to come out. So why don't you start off by being you from the beginning, then you don't have to pretend you're someone else 2 years down the road. So I'd say, because you get tired of pretending to be something else, someone else. So might as well just be you, and then people can like you or not like you. There's so many people on earth that it's fine if some don't like you. And yeah, obviously, like you said, enjoying the process and not chasing the dollar. I mean, you have to, that, but it's really your personal work that gets you hired, not the other way around. So if you can put out personal work every year, at least one bit of it, that's really good. And then you're doing already 80% of it.
Thank you so much. If you could do me a favor, just at the end, just leave it open. But thank you so much for joining.
Thanks,
I'm sorry about the few technical issues we had, but I loved a little conversation, and I really hope we can do it again sometime, if not in person. So thank you again. It's an absolute inspiration talking to you. Really
Next year. Thanks, man. Thanks for taking the time.
All right. Take care, Alex. Thank you.
Bye, man.